Hey there, thanks for listening in and welcome to another Ellipsis Drive podcast. Here we dive into the stories of new technologies and concepts that transform and empower the geospatial industry, and we learn from the key players behind them. In today's spotlight is Ordnance Survey's Geovation. My name is Rosalie van der Maas, and here with me is Jonathan Lewis, technical lead at Geovation. Lewis, welcome. Could you introduce yourself a bit further and tell us about yourself as well as your work with Geovation?
Yeah, of course. Hi, good morning. I'm Jonathan Lewis. I'm the technical lead at Geovation. So for those who don't know, Geovation is a startup accelerator program and community and ecosystem. It's run by Ordnance Survey and backed by HM Land Registry. So we're all about empowering new ways to get value from geospatial data. So we work with a huge range of startups across a variety of, prop tech ecosystems, but also looking at kind of ways that we can use geospatial data to do fantastic things. But that's me.
All right, excellent. So could you elaborate a bit on the journey of Geovation itself? Like, why is it called into life? What was the aim? Did you reach any of that? Tell us more about how it entered the stage.
Yeah, so Geovation started off as a series of challenges that were run in 2009, all about trying to find new ways to get value from geospatial data. And to be honest, we're still doing that now in 2023. It just changed how we do it. So rather than a series of challenges, we're now more about creating an ecosystem where we can create value from geospatial data, working with startups who are trying to do fantastic, amazing things. So we're based in London as a kind of co-working space, which is obviously fantastic to have a kind of a space just dedicated to geospatial innovation. But then we also have now an accelerator program, which we run every 6 months in partnership with HM Land Registry. So for those who don't know, Land Registry, it's kind of like the equivalent to like cadastral systems in Europe, but it's all about managing the exchange of property information. And so we have two streams on the accelerator program. We have a geospatial stream and then a geotech stream and then a prop tech stream, much more focused on the prop tech ecosystem of the market. So thinking conveyancing, estate agents, anything really to do with property. And so what we do now is much more about how we can support and leverage geospatial data to do innovation and create a kind of environment where we can support our startups to make the most out of it. And so quite often our startups are coming into the geospatial domain for the first time. They might know they've got a geospatial problem. They might know that there's something that they need to do, but they're not really sure how to approach it. And so that's kind of the journey that we can help take them on, is, unlocking that value. I think geospatial data, it's not always the most intuitive data to use sometimes. There's a lot of complexity embedded into it. Nobody's born knowing how to use a datum, but over time we can upskill them, give them a lot of experience that we have and share that and help them on their journey.
So that's interesting that you actually find that a good chunk of the startups that join your hub and join your accelerator haven't worked with spatial data before. Does that mean they really start from the problem that they want to fix instead of a technology angle?
Yeah, at Geovation, we're really problem-centric.
That's refreshing.
For us, it's all about the problem that you're trying to solve. And then geospatial data is just a component of how you solve that. If you're going to succeed as a startup, you've got to be problem-centric, because there's a risk that over time, your solution changes. How the technology used to solve that problem will change, especially at the moment with AI. There's a lot of upheaval within the startup space about how you solve your problems. And so, or the problems of your users, I should say. So yeah, for us, it's not necessarily about the technology. It's more about the problem that you're working with, the users. And so we really encourage like a really strong amount of user engagement, talking to your users, getting feedback, testing with them, making sure that what you're developing is something that they actually want and desire, rather than something that you're really passionate about. But yeah, it's fun. It's really good.
It is. So what tends to be the background of teams that join your organization in terms of like professional backgrounds, academic backgrounds? Also, do they join as a team already, or can it also be individual founders? What's the situation when people get started?
It's a really good question. To be honest, there's not a single type. There's a huge variety. Quite often we find there are people that have come from a specific industry. They've worked in that industry a fair amount of time, and then they might think, I've gotten a bit of an idea here of how I could improve, disrupt this industry with something a bit novel. And, over time they build that startup. As a kind of community, as a program, we support quite early stage startups. So we're often about, people that might have been ongoing a few months to around a year. And really it's about understanding what are they doing and then supporting them and how they might use geospatial data. So quite often they know a little bit about geo, but they're not experts. They know enough to be dangerous, maybe, but they're not at that point where they can suddenly go, yeah, I know everything. And often it's about, helping them understand, what's possible, what's feasible, what data is out there that could support them, and then trying to give them advice on how they kind of take those next steps. Most of the time, I think we see kind of teams, usually like a founder or co-founder set up. But then we've got solo founders as well who do amazing work as well. And then, for them, it's much more about how they grow their team really quickly to bring in the skill sets that they need to get started. But yeah, it's a good setup. And then, to be honest, I think we can support any shape and size. It's more about what they're trying to achieve than kind of the team they've got at the beginning of it. We've got a few startups that have come straight from university, and that's really exciting. They're doing some really novel stuff, but for them, the challenge is then also how do you then form a business spun out of a kind of a university projects, and so they have different challenges to kind of tackle.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you guys really do cater to specific startup needs, and your primary added value is that ecosystem and that knowledge around spatial data. Is it also the availability of the data itself? Because of course, lots of data is open, but lots of data is also not open. So how do you guys work with that situation? Like, how do you allow early stage innovation when a business model may not be clear, when revenue isn't flowing in actively? How do you make sure all the components are in place, including the data itself?
Yeah, Geovation is a bit unique. We're very much a specialist accelerator in the fact that we're focused only on geospatial data, but we're really lucky. We're backed by Ordnance Survey and HM Land Registry, and from both of those entities, we get access to private geospatial data that isn't open to anyone. And so our startups can leverage that data while they're in kind of a development mode to get access to that data, not pay for it, but get access to the full sets of data to kind of build out their solutions. And then over time, as they get into that happy place, if they've got customers, they've got people who are paying for, their solutions, their services, they can commercialize on the back of that data as well. So we think it's quite a fair setup. It lets the startup be in that position where actually they can use the real data, they can build upon it, create that value, but then when they go to commercialize, actually it's there to support them as well. And so there's ways of generating revenue. So yeah, it's a good setup. And we've had to develop that because we obviously are unique in the fact that we're very much specialist on geospatial data itself rather than kind of problem space.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that is a fair business setup, I would say. And I can imagine a lot of startups would kill for just, unrestricted and supported access to the content they need up until the time they start to commercialize. Well, that's exactly what one would need. So yeah, I can imagine that's a friendly setup to get started in.
Yeah, we're really lucky. Both of our organizations, Land Registry and Ordnance Survey, they're both really supportive of the startup community. And for them, obviously, the value is they get startups who might not necessarily be in the space of thinking about OS or land registry data, using their data and actually creating value off of the back of it. And the best thing about startups is they grow and they become your future customers. And so for OS and land registry, the value is supporting customers who will be your future in the long run. And we've seen that through some of the successes that Geovation's backed in the past, who've become more really large entities who are doing fantastic things now. So yeah, it's kind of like an investment in the future for that, in that sense.
That's a pretty short timeline to success then still, because you mentioned you got started in 18, 19.
Yeah.
Not that many years back.
Yeah, and we've got some fantastic startups that are doing really good things. I could name them off. It'd be unfair on the people who I don't name, but we've got some fantastic startups.
We'll do some shout outs in comments.
Yeah, well, a good example might be the Land App, who are now doing amazing work in terms of creating value for farmers in the UK in terms of mapping out farmers' assets and then trying to create effectively a digital map of each farm. And when they first started, obviously, like any startup, they had a plan, but actually, in the fullness of time, they've gone to do amazing things, and now a huge amount of farms within the UK are using them to better understand their farms at an individual level. So yeah, it's been a really good success. I do, but yeah, that's good.
Great. Yeah, so you mentioned before that working with spatial data can be quite challenging for anyone, whether you just got started or whether you've been doing this for a long time. So what are some of the operational challenges that you run into when startups start leveraging this content from also those entities that are backing you?
I mean, one of the big things that we had was, what we're trying to do is share data effectively with our startups. And so, before we were using Ellipsis, we were using a really kind of a poor setup, I would say, but it was actually a legacy of COVID. For a while, Geovation was sharing its data on effectively a network access storage drive that you could use when you were in our hub in London. During COVID, obviously, lockdowns, nobody could come into the hub. It's a co-working space. It wouldn't have been great from a COVID perspective. So suddenly, nobody could get access to data. So we set up what was effectively like a bucket of information. Think like an S3 bucket, but really quickly realized our users weren't enjoying it. The user experience was really poor. And actually, we weren't treating it as spatial data. We were just treating it as generic data. And, it wasn't making the best value for our users. So we started looking for solutions. And actually, Richard and my team had heard about Ellipsis. And it's perfect for us. Our users love it. The user experience is really intuitive. It lets them get access to the data in a really nice way from the web. Whereas before we were using kind of some custom software to do it. And actually, it's treating it as spatial data. They can get access to it. They can see it. They can view it before they download it. And they can also just get small sections of the data if they don't want all of it, because our data can be quite massive in size. So yeah, it's fantastic. It's been really good for us. And, our community, who are really passionate, but also quite maybe opinionated. I think it goes with the territory of startups.
Yes.
They're not afraid of giving feedback, but actually with Ellipsis, they just give us positive feedback. So it's lovely. It's maybe solved one of our problems, and it's not a headache for us anymore. So it's been fantastic.
That's really good. That's really great. Yeah, that's also interesting because I wasn't entirely aware that the startups that would be using it are also new to the space. So in that sense, it makes a lot more sense that it's appreciated that it is indeed visual and there and, tangible and explorable without, any hurdles to jump.
I think part of it is just the fact that the user experience is quite intuitive, and it also references kind of similar technology they might have used in the past. So it's not, for them, it's not a big shock. It's maybe a nice way of dipping their toe in the spatial ecosystem and getting access to data. And so, yeah, we really like it. And obviously, because we've got such a big community, we built some tooling around it as well to support access. And so, yeah, it's been really fantastic. And, I know the team are really happy with it, and yeah, long may it continue.
Excellent. That's great. That's really fantastic. So do you think the combination of innovative use of location data and tech startups are what we're needing to solve some of the world's bigger challenges? Is that an ingredient that you think is actually key? Or is it more about creating, good businesses that solve the world's maybe second most important challenges?
It's a really good question. I think, I think as I say, everything happens somewhere. And, for me, geospatial data is fundamental in solving some of our problems. And through the startups that we take on, we've seen fantastic work coming through in terms of startups from farming to retrofitting. And the underlying component that's in common with all these things is especially for us, is geospatial data, because, you've got to have an understanding of what you're trying to affect, what you're trying to impact, understanding what exists there now, and then how do you improve it in the future? And so location data is a fundamental component of that. It's an underlying consistency of addressing features, buildings, fields. You combine all that together and you just get magic, don't you, at the end? And so what we're trying to do within Geovation is give people access to that data and then try and hopefully let them do good things and build upon it. So yeah, I do think it's important. I think over time, we've definitely seen the startups that we take on change. We're seeing much more interest in biodiversity, agri-tech startups coming through, just because there's obviously a huge amount of interest in, the sourcing of our food at the moment and kind of the pressures on that in terms of carbon intensity and how we can meet our food needs, but also, try and improve the situation is at the moment. And geospatial data is a really important part of that, changing farming practices to be more supportive of improved techniques. It's definitely something that we're really passionate about and, we can support. So yeah, I do think so.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, every challenge is tied to a location, and that location can be ignored in trying to get to a solution there. So yeah, to me as well. I mean, obviously we share an industry here, so we might be biased. But yeah, that's something we can all get very excited about.
I think, if you look at the sources of data that we see now, in terms of just both private data, but also open data as well, there's obviously fantastic data sets there that can support really amazing things. A lot of the satellite data now can unlock huge amounts of value in terms of agri-tech space. And we're seeing that because actually what you can do is you don't have to make a solution just for one country. You can make it for, whole nations or whole continents. And so, yeah, it's really interesting, especially, with the startups that we support. We find that a lot of them are, they obviously are there very much on a problem focus, but they're also super passionate about it. And to be honest, that's what kind of drives me, is seeing some of the passion for solving problems that are close to people's heart. That's quite a nice thing to get up in the morning and support.
I can imagine. Absolutely. So what's next in 2024 for Geovation and the startups that you're supporting?
I mean, same again. We've got the next round of our accelerator program opening in the spring, which will be really exciting. And, it'll be really interesting to see
what's the deadline for a submission there?
What a good question. I think it's around Feb time. So it's coming up really soon. We've definitely got a really interesting time in terms of the startup ecosystem space. We've got a load of interest in terms of AI, obviously, at the moment, with the likes of ChatGPT and Gemini and all these sorts of AI solutions coming on board. I think from a startup perspective, for a geospatial perspective, it's going to be understanding how do you unlock the potential of that, because we're still going to be user focused, but obviously AI is going to be a massive impact on the startup space. And so it'll be trying to support startups on that journey of understanding how they can unlock the value of maybe a bit of geo and a bit of AI put together. That's the plan for 2024, and keep working with our amazing community and ecosystem that we have at the moment, and trying to keep growing it and keep letting people get access to amazing data.
All right. So lots of reasons to keep a close eye on what you guys are doing and what your startup community is doing, and to keep a close eye on that submission deadline as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'll send you a message with the actual details so you know for certain.
We'll drop that as well. So yeah, on that note, we are at time. So yeah, on behalf of the listeners, a warm thanks to sharing this story and sharing Geovation's story. And if you're tuning in and you'd like to know more about Geovation, about opportunities there, make sure to visit their websites and socials. And yeah, we'll make sure to leave some links and info in the description as well, so you can go check them out. With that, thanks for being here with us today. And until the next one.
Thank you.